My parents tried to steal my $3.5 million inheritance, but the Courtroom Showdown and Grandpa's secret letter exposed their lies and left them completely humiliated. Hey, Reddit, I'm Liam, 22M, and what happened to me feels like something pulled straight from a movie. Betrayal, revenge, and a courtroom twist that left my parents completely speechless. Let's take it from the beginning. When I turned 18, just weeks after graduating high school, my parents, Margaret and Thomas, called me into the living room. Mom crossed her arms and said, "It's time you start pulling your own weight." Dad added coldly, "We're done supporting you. You're an adult now." I stood there stunned, heart racing. No help with college, no place to stay. They handed me a small box with my things and told me to figure life out on my own. That night, I ended up crashing in a friend's garage, feeling completely alone. The only person who ever genuinely cared for me was my grandfather, Edward. He was my dad's father, yet he treated me like his own son. Growing up, he taught me how to woodwork, how to change tires, how to survive on my own. When I had nowhere else to go, Grandpa Edward welcomed me into his cabin on the outskirts of town, paid for my community college classes, and gave me what my parents could never provide: love, dignity, and guidance. He didn't have much money, but what he gave me was priceless. Then, 2 months ago, Grandpa passed suddenly from a heart attack. I was crushed. He was my only real family. A week later, I received a letter that would change everything. Grandpa had named me in his will. A formal reading was scheduled at the courthouse, and all family members were invited. I walked into the courthouse wearing a simple thrift store suit, and there they were. Margaret and Thomas sat up front, grinning as if they were his beloved children. Dad glanced at me and sneered, "Nice of you to show up." Mom smiled sweetly, "We'll help you manage whatever Grandpa left behind." "Don't worry." My blood boiled. Mr. Breener, a stern executive of the will, began reading. "To my grandson, Liam, who showed me compassion when others turn away, I leave my entire estate valued at $3.5 million, including the cabin, rental properties, rare coins, and all my savings." Silence fell. My mother gasped loudly, and my father stood shocked, as if he had been slapped across the face. Then Mr. Breener turned the page to my parents. "I leave the following nothing. I warned you repeatedly to treat people with kindness, especially your own child. You failed. May this serve as your final lesson." The room went completely silent. Dad turned bright red. Mom jumped up screaming, "This is a mistake." But Mr. Breener continued calmly, "Everything is legally sound." The will was properly notarized and recorded. They turned to me trying to smile. Dad stammered, "Son, Liam, we can still help you with the estate. You'll need guidance." I walked to the judge's bench, picked up my copy of the will, and said calmly, "No thanks. Grandpa gave me the only guidance I'll ever need." Then I left. But this was only the beginning. After the will reading, I moved into Grandpa's cabin, now legally mine. It was quiet, surrounded by towering trees and a peace that felt like Grandpa's presence. Over the next few days, I met with the estate lawyer, finalized documents, and explored Grandpa's belongings. And that's when I realized the full magnitude of his legacy. Hidden among his papers were the deeds to the rental homes, a bank account with $1.2 million, rare coins, and antique war memorabilia worth hundreds of thousands. Every detail had been thought through. Grandpa had ensured my parents would not touch a single penny. Of course, they tried. 3 days later, Margaret and Thomas showed up at the cabin uninvited. Dad knocked like a cop. I opened the door slowly, and he stormed in. Mom followed with a manila folder sweetly saying, "We just want what's fair. You're too young to handle this." I laughed out loud. "You mean the same man who kicked me out 4 years ago? That man." They were not amused. Dad slammed the folder on the table. "We'll sue. Grandpa was not of sound mind. We'll get everything." I stared him down. "Go ahead. There are video recordings, and 2 doctors cleared his mental health. If you want to lose and ruin your reputation, be my guest." They stormed out, Mom hissing, You're not the only one who knows how to play dirty. The following week, chaos ensued. Someone tried to forge my signature to access bank accounts. Tenants received fake termination notices. Even my coin collection was appraised without my knowledge. But I had already prepared. Grandpa had added a clause in his will. Any attempt to interfere with the estate would make the perpetrators legally liable. Then came the family mediation. They reached out, pretending to be humble. Mom wrote, "We just want peace." Dad added, "No lawyers." A red flag that I ignored by bringing my lawyer and a recording device. In the meeting, Mom whispered, not knowing she was recorded, threatening me to sign power of attorney or claim Grandpa was abusive. I stood, nodded to my lawyer, and handed over evidence, forged documents, bank statements, tenant complaints, and the estate clause. My lawyer, Miss Darden, announced, "We are filing restraining orders and pressing charges for fraud, identity theft, and will tampering." Their faces turned from smug to terrified. 3 days later, court summons arrived. 3 days after that, I opened Grandpa's final letter marked, "In case they come after you." Inside were records showing my parents had been secretly funded by Grandpa for over 2 decades and that my dad had embezzled over $200,000,000. Audio recordings proved their lies and mockery. I had proof that would forever protect me. 2 weeks later, the court hearing was packed. The judge heard the evidence, listened to the audio of my mother threatening me, and ruled in my favor. My parents were denied any claim, and legal actions were taken against them. Their smugness had been replaced with defeat. I kept the cabin, renovated the properties, hired honest advisors, and started a small foundation in Grandpa's name. It was not just revenge. It was justice, and a life built with integrity. 6 months later, I haven't heard from them. I sit on the porch, sip my tea, and think of Grandpa. Not just the man who saved me, but the man who prepared me for a storm I never saw coming. I didn't just inherit his money. I inherited his strength. The days after the mediation felt like a calm before a storm. I went about my life quietly, managing the cabin and rental properties, meeting with my estate lawyer, and organizing Grandpa's belongings. Yet in the back of my mind, I knew my parents were not finished. Margaret and Thomas had already tried forgery, sabotage, and threats. Now, they were quiet, but that was just their silence before the next attempt. 2 weeks later, the first court hearing arrived. The room was packed, not with family, but with lawyers, bank representatives, and even a reporter from the local paper. My parents arrived late, pale and muted, clearly realizing that their smugness had vanished. Gone were the expensive suits and fake smiles. Instead, they shuffled in with nervous eyes, whispering to their new attorney. The judge gave a sharp look at them, and the room went quiet. Miss Darden, my lawyer, opened the case with calm authority, laying out the evidence methodically. The forged bank documents, statements from tenants who had been threatened by fake notices, the estate clause about interference. Each piece of paper was a nail in my parents' attempted claim. Then came the audio recording for mediation. My mother's voice, full of threats and greed, filled the room. "You sign over that power of attorney now, or we'll say Grandpa was abusive." Silence fell so deep you could hear a pin drop. My father tried to interrupt, rising to his feet, shouting, "This is a setup. It's unfair." The judge cut him off without a word. "Sir, sit down or be removed from the courtroom." My mother hid her face in her hands, whimpering. Her words could not be heard, and the recording spoke louder than anything she could say. The judge turned to my side, calm and decisive. "The evidence shows coercion, fraud, and attempted will tampering. The court rules in favor of the beneficiary, Liam Edward." The court clerk announced the decision. My parents were denied any claim to the estate. Security escorted them out, their faces red and eyes wide with shock. From smug grins at the will reading to defeat in the courtroom, the transformation was complete. My grandfather's estate, his cabin, rental properties, and every precious item were legally mine, protected and untouchable. Even after the court, the story did not end. Within days, The bank filed civil action against them for attempted fraud, and the tenants confirmed their statements about impersonation attempts. My father's company opened an internal investigation into his ethics, and my mother lost most of her clients after news of her actions spread quietly through the media. They were scrambling, trying to keep their lives from falling apart, while I sat in the cabin, peaceful, with my life back on track. And then I opened Grandpa's sealed letter. The one marked, "In case they come after you." It was everything. Handwritten pages in elegant script, old journals, financial records, and most crucially, proof that my parents had been secretly funded by Grandpa for over 20 years. Mortgage payments, car loans, business trips, all paid by him, quietly supporting people who had turned their backs on me. Yet when he discovered their theft and lies, he cut them off completely and prepared me to inherit everything, along with the knowledge of their deception. I played the letter's audio recording during a private session with my lawyer. My father's confession, my mother's mockery, and Grandpa's stern voice warning them. It was all there, preserved forever. They could try to fight me, but they could never touch the estate without ruining themselves completely. Yet a part of me knew that this was not over. My parents were proud, greedy, and dangerous. They had already shown they could go to any length to get what they wanted. And while the court ruled in my favor, I could not forget the subtle threats, the veiled smiles, the whispered words that showed they would never truly accept losing. So I prepared, quietly and calmly. Every document, every property, every legal clause was reinforced. I hired an honest financial advisor, strengthened security, and made sure Grandpa's protections were unbreakable. The cabin became my fortress, a place of peace, yet ready for any battle that might come. Sitting on the porch one evening, watching the sunset filter through the trees, I thought of Grandpa. Not just the man who saved me, but the man who built me to survive. And as I sipped my sweet tea, a quiet smile formed on my face. I had won, but the story was not yet complete. Somewhere out there, my parents were plotting, and I was ready for whatever came next. Because Grandpa had not only left me money and property, he had left me strength, wisdom, and a secret that would forever protect me. And I knew, deep down, that one day, I would see the final chapter of their attempted revenge, and this time, I would write it on my terms.